My half-sister wanted to reconnect after years of silence, but I could sense she had ulterior motives and wasn't being transparent. It all began on an otherwise uneventful Tuesday evening. I was in the middle of assembling a DIY bookshelf, the kind that makes you question your life decisions, when my phone buzzed. Glancing at the screen, I froze. The name Avery flashed across it, sending a ripple of unease through me. My half-sister hadn't reached out in years. In fact, I couldn't even recall the last time we spoke. Perhaps it was at my mom's birthday 7 years ago, and even then it was nothing more than a polite greeting before she retreated to her own corner of the celebration. Avery, hey Caleb, I know it's been a long time. I've been thinking about you and wanted to reconnect. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime? I stared at the text, half expecting a follow-up message to explain her sudden outreach. But nothing else came. Who's texting you? Olivia's voice cut through my thoughts. My fiancée was leaning against the kitchen counter, sipping tea, her dark hair in a messy bun. Avery, I replied, the name feeling unfamiliar on my tongue. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise. Your sister Avery? The one who disappeared from everyone's life? Half-sister, I corrected instinctively, unsure why I felt the need. Yeah, that Avery. Now she wants to meet for coffee. Olivia's skepticism was obvious. She knew enough about my strained relationship with Avery to understand why this sudden attempt at contact felt off. Tossing my phone onto the couch, I picked up the bookshelf instructions, trying to act as though it didn't bother me. But it did. To explain why Avery's message unsettled me so much, you need some context. We share the same mom, Joanna, but different fathers. Growing up, Avery and I were close, closer than most step-siblings might be. I played the role of the protective older brother, always trying to shield her from the chaos of our blended family. My mom's second marriage to Richard, Avery's dad, was far from harmonious. Richard wasn't abusive, but he was cold and controlling, stifling both my mom and Avery. When my mom finally filed for divorce, the aftermath was messy. Richard got full custody of Avery, and I rarely saw her after that. Over time, our bond faded. On the rare occasions we did speak, she seemed distant and guarded, like she'd become a completely different person. The breaking point for me was at our grandmother's funeral. Avery arrived late, avoided me entirely, and left before the reading of the will. She didn't need to stick around, though. Grandma's estate had been divided equally between Mom, Ellie, my younger sister from Mom's third marriage, and me. Avery received nothing, not because Grandma didn't care for her, but because she'd already been given a substantial trust fund when she turned 18. So why now? Why coffee? Against my better judgment, I replied. Me, hey Avery, it's been a while, coffee sounds good. When and where? Within minutes, she responded with a location, a trendy cafe downtown, and a time, Friday at noon. Her efficiency made it seem like she'd been waiting for me to say yes. Are you actually going to meet her? Olivia asked later that night as we got into bed. I don't see why not, I said, though part of me wasn't convinced. Maybe she just wants to catch up, I added. Or maybe she wants something, Olivia countered, pulling the blanket over her shoulders. Just be careful, okay? Friday came quickly. The cafe Avery had chosen was overpriced and trendy, the kind of place where they served avocado toast garnished with edible flowers. I spotted her immediately. She looked different, of course, but not just older. There was something else, a calculated air about her. Her once carefree smile had been replaced with something more reserved. She waved me over, and I sat across from her, trying to push away the awkwardness. Caleb, she said brightly, wow, it's so good to see you. You too, I replied, though my words felt hollow. We made small talk for a while. She told me about her work as a freelance graphic designer, and I mentioned the wedding preparations. But Gradually, the conversation took a subtle shift. "So, how is Mom doing?" she asked, stirring her cappuccino. "She's good, busy with Ellie's college stuff," I answered. "Ah, that's great," she said, but her gaze lingered on mine. "And the family? Everything stable?" A question felt odd, but I shrugged it off. "Yeah, I guess." As the conversation continued, her questions grew increasingly specific. She inquired about Grandma's house, Mom's health, and the inheritance, though she tried to frame it as casual curiosity. "Do you still have the lake cabin?" she asked, referring to the property Grandma had left me. "Yeah, I do," I replied cautiously. "Why?" "Oh, no reason," she said quickly, waving it off. "I just remember spending summers there. Good times, you know." Her response felt rehearsed, as though she'd practiced how to bring it up without sounding too obvious. By the time I left the cafe, my gut was telling me something was off. Olivia's words echoed in my mind. Maybe she wants something. Still, a part of me wanted to believe Avery's intentions were genuine, that she really did just want to reconnect. Maybe I was overthinking it, but as I was driving home, my phone buzzed again. It was another message from Avery. "Avery, thanks for meeting with me. It was so nice catching up. I've been thinking, maybe we could spend more time together. I've really missed the family." I stared at the text for what felt like ages before replying. "Me? Sure, let's see where this goes." I wasn't sure if I meant it. But I did know one thing. Avery wasn't being completely honest with me. The next time we met, it was for dinner at a diner I suggested. I figured a more relaxed setting might ease the tension, and honestly, it was a lot cheaper than the cafe she'd picked before. Avery arrived 10 minutes late, looking casually stylish. Her jeans had that trendy, ripped look, and her leather jacket gave off a vibe that screamed, "I want to look effortlessly cool, but it took me an hour to pull this together." "Sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "It's fine," I replied, gesturing toward the menu. Hungry?" We placed our orders, and the conversation started off light. She chuckled at my horrible cooking attempts, teased me about Olivia and me arguing over wedding colors, and shared a few amusing anecdotes from her work. But when the food arrived, the mood shifted. "Do you ever think about the old days?" she asked, idly pushing her fries around her plate. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Why?" She shrugged. "I don't know. I guess I just miss how simple things were. You and me against the world. Remember?" I did. Back then, Avery and I were inseparable, but bringing it up felt like reopening a wound that had already scarred over. Yeah," I said, keeping my response brief. "You know," she continued, "I always wonder what things would have been like if Mom hadn't divorced Dad." "Richard," I corrected instinctively. "He wasn't my dad." Avery rolled her eyes. "You know what I mean." The truth was, I didn't entirely understand. Richard had been controlling, but he'd always favored Avery. I couldn't help but wonder if she missed him or just the perks of being his daughter. Then she began steering the conversation again. "So, Mom's doing well? And Ellie's applying to colleges, right?" "Yeah," I said cautiously. "She's got a few options lined up." "Oh," Avery said, pausing mid-bite. "Just curious. I'd love to catch up with them, too." She hesitated, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Do they ever talk about me?" That question hit harder than I expected. The truth was, they didn't. Not really. Avery had become more of a ghost than a memory in our family. "They ask about you sometimes," I lied. Her expression softened. "That's nice to hear. I was worried they might have, forgotten about me." I didn't respond, and instead focused on my burger, hoping she'd let it drop. Later that evening, I told Olivia about the dinner. "She's fishing," Olivia said, sitting cross-legged on the couch. For what? Validation, attention, money? Who knows? Olivia shrugged, looking unsurprised. She didn't ask for anything outright, I argued, though even I wasn't convinced. She's not dumb, Caleb. People don't just show up out of nowhere without a reason. Trust me, she wants something. Olivia wasn't the only one with doubts. My best friend Noah was equally blunt when I brought it up over beers the next night. Dude, she's playing you, he said. Why now? Why not 5 or 10 years ago? I had no answer. Still, part of me wanted to give Avery the benefit of the doubt. She was family, and as much as I hated to admit it, I missed her. The next time we hung out, it was her suggestion, a walk in the park near her apartment. It felt surprisingly normal, almost comforting to talk and stroll like we did as kids. But then, almost casually, she brought it up. "Do you ever use the lake cabin anymore?" she asked, glancing at me. Not much," I replied carefully. "Why?" "Oh, no reason," she said lightly. "I was just thinking about all the fun we had there. It must be expensive to maintain, though, with taxes and everything." A red flag rose in my mind, but I tried to brush it off. "It's manageable," I said vaguely. She didn't push further, but the seed was planted. Over the next few weeks, Avery and I spent more time together. She even started visiting Mom and Ellie, which initially felt genuine, but soon they noticed cracks in her facade. "She keeps asking about Grandma's will," Ellie mentioned one afternoon. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "Nothing, but it's weird, like, why would she care about that now?" And the unease in my gut grew. I replayed all our conversations in my head, noticing how they kept circling back to money, property, and family dynamics. One day, my neighbor Harper stopped me as I was leaving for work. "Hey, Caleb, she said hesitantly, "is someone staying at your place during the day?" "What? No, why?" "I've seen a woman around your backyard a couple of times. Blonde, mid-20s. She looks a lot like Avery." My stomach tightened. "Thanks for letting me know," I said, my thoughts racing as I drove to work. That evening I confronted Avery over the phone. "You've been by my house, haven't you?" I asked. There was a pause. "What? No, why would I do that?" "My neighbors saw you." "Harper, right?" she said quickly. "Yeah, I walked by once. I was in the area and thought about stopping in, but you weren't home." Her response felt too convenient, too rehearsed. "What were you looking for?" I pressed. "Nothing. God, Caleb, I'm not snooping around your life." But she was, and we both knew it. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I called Marcus, our family lawyer who'd handled Grandma's estate. "Marcus, can you check something for me?" I asked. "What's going on?" he replied, sounding wary. "I think Avery's trying to find a loophole in Grandma's will or something. Can you make sure everything's secure?" "I'll look into it," he promised. A few days later, Marcus called back. "You were right to be cautious," he said. "Avery's been asking about the estate. She even called my office last week pretending to be you." A chill ran down my spine. By now, the pieces were falling into place. Avery's sudden return, her pointed questions, her lurking around my house, it all led to one conclusion. She was after the money. But why? What had driven her to this? I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. After Marcus's call, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been dragged into something far messier than I'd imagined. Avery's charm, her sudden reappearance, and the way she mixed genuine warmth with calculated questions. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle I wasn't sure I was ready to solve. That weekend, I braced myself for what might come next. I decided it was time to confront her. It wasn't going to be a dramatic shouting match. I just needed clear answers. But Avery beat me to it. She showed up at my house unannounced on Saturday afternoon, holding a bakery box. "I brought cookies," she said with a smile, that seemed far too cheerful to be genuine. "Is Olivia around?" "She's out running errands," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. Avery looked around the house with a little too much curiosity. "Wow, Caleb, you've done really well for yourself. This place is stunning." "Thanks," I said flatly, keeping my tone neutral. We sat at the dining table, the box of cookies untouched between us. I decided to get straight to the point. "What were you asking Marcus about Grandma's will?" The smile on her face faltered, and though she recovered quickly, it wasn't fast enough. "Don't lie to me," I interrupted. "He told me you called his office, pretending to be me." Her cheeks flushed, but instead of looking guilty, she appeared annoyed. "Fine," she said, leaning back in her chair. "I wanted to see if there was anything left. Happy now?" No, I'm not," I snapped. "You've been sneaking around, lying, and now I'm supposed to just forget about it because you brought cookies?" Avery's expression hardened. "You don't understand, Caleb. Things haven't been easy for me." "Then explain it to me," I said, my voice softening. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the table. When she finally spoke, her tone was quieter, almost vulnerable. "Chloe," she said. "Who's Chloe? A friend?" "Or at least I thought she was," Avery said with a sigh, running a hand through her hair. "I owe her money, a lot of money." The story she shared was as messy as I had anticipated. After losing her steady job, Avery had turned to Chloe, who she believed was a friend willing to help her get back on her feet. Chloe had lent her money for rent, bills, and other expenses, but now she was demanding repayment, with interest. "It's not just the money," Avery said, her voice trembling slightly. "Chloe has connections. She's got people. She's been threatening me. Caleb." Part of me wanted to believe her, but something about her story didn't sit right. "How much do you owe her?" I asked. 30,000. 30,000? I repeated, my voice rising. "How did you even—" "It doesn't matter," she cut me off. "What matters is that I'm running out of time. Chloe knows about the inheritance, Caleb. She's pressuring me to find a way to access it." "And you thought you could just, what, trick me into helping you?" Avery flinched, but didn't deny it. After she left, I felt more conflicted than ever. If she was telling the truth, she was in serious danger. But if she wasn't, then she was manipulating me, and I couldn't let that slide. Harper's earlier observation about Avery snooping around my property lingered in my mind, so I decided to check the security cameras I'd installed last year after a break-in scare. Sure enough, there she was, Avery sneaking around the backyard a week earlier. But she wasn't alone. Another woman, tall and blonde, was with her. "Chloe," I muttered under my breath. The footage showed them peering through the windows and speaking in hushed tones. At one point, Chloe gestured toward the lake cabin key visible through the mudroom window. They didn't attempt to break in, but their intentions were clear. The next morning, I called Marcus again. "I need you to dig up whatever you can on this Chloe person," I said. "She's working with Avery, and I think they're trying to get to the cabin." "I'll see what I can find," Marcus replied. "In the meantime, be cautious. If they're willing to go this far, they might not stop at snooping." His warning made my stomach churn. A few days later, Marcus called back with an update. "You were right to be wary," he said. "Chloe's bad news. She's been sued multiple times for fraud and extortion. It seems she targets vulnerable people and drains them for everything they're worth." "What about Avery?" I asked. "Do you think she's a victim, or is she involved?" "That's harder to determine," Marcus admitted. "It's possible Chloe's manipulating her, but given Avery's financial struggles, she might be more complicit than you think." I didn't know how to process that. Avery had always been skilled at playing the victim when it suited her, but this felt bigger than her usual behavior. The final straw came when Olivia found a note tucked under our front door. Written in messy handwriting, it read, "Caleb, you have something that doesn't belong to you. Be smart, or you'll regret it." Olivia's face went pale as she handed it to me. "What the hell is this?" she asked. "It's Chloe," I said grimly. "She's escalating." "We need to call the police," Olivia insisted. "And tell them what? That my half-sister and her shady friend are mad about an inheritance?" I shook my head. "We don't have enough evidence." "She threatened you, Caleb," Olivia's voice rose. "That's not nothing." "I'll handle it," I promised, though I had no idea how. That night, I called Avery. "I know about Chloe," I said, as soon as she answered. There was a long pause. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb. I saw the footage. I know you were at my house with her." "Caleb, I can explain." "No, you can't," I cut her off. "You've been lying to me since you showed up, and now you've dragged some con artist into this. What's wrong with you?" Her voice cracked. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice, Avery," I shot back. "And you chose to betray me again." "I'm sorry," she whispered. For the first time, she sounded genuinely remorseful, but I couldn't trust her, not anymore. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Avery and Chloe in my backyard, whispering like conspirators. My life was starting to feel like a bad crime drama, and I wasn't sure who the real villain was anymore. By the next morning, I'd had enough. If Avery wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd uncover it myself. The first thing I did was visit Harper, my neighbor. She opened the door in sweatpants, looking mildly confused. "Hey, Caleb, what's up?" "Harper, I need to know exactly what you saw when Avery and that woman were at my house," I said, skipping any pleasantries. Her eyes widened. "I already told you they were in the backyard looking around. Why, did something happen?" "Yeah, something happened," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. "Do you remember anything specific? Did they take anything or say anything?" Harper frowned, thinking. "They didn't take anything while I was watching, but the blonde one, Chloe, I guess, was definitely the one in charge. She kept gesturing at things as though she were giving directions." Avery looked uneasy, almost as if she didn't want to be there, but that didn't make me feel any better. "Thanks, Harper," I said. "Let me know if you see anything else, all right?" She nodded, her worry evident. "Be careful, Caleb. Those two don't strike me as the type to play fair." Next, I decided to do my own research on Chloe. Marcus had already shared the basics, but I wanted more information. It didn't take long to track down her social media profiles, meticulously curated pages filled with glamorous selfies and motivational quotes about hustling. However, as I dug deeper, the picture turned darker. Post after post surfaced from people accusing her of scams, fraudulent business deals, shady loan practices, and even blackmail. She had clearly left a trail of chaos in her wake, and now Avery was caught in her web. I couldn't figure out if Avery was one of Chloe's victims or if she was working with her, or perhaps both. That evening, Marcus called with another update. "I found something you'll want to see," he said. "It's an old police report. Chloe was investigated a few years ago for extortion. One of her victims claimed she used personal information to threaten them into paying money. The case was dropped for lack of evidence, but here's the kicker. Avery's name is mentioned in the report." My stomach sank. "As a suspect?" "No, as a witness. She gave a statement claiming she barely knew Chloe, but the victim alleged they were working together. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and the picture they formed wasn't good. I confronted Avery the next day. "You lied to me again," I said as soon as she opened the door. She looked exhausted, as if she hadn't slept in days. "What are you talking about now?" Chloe, the extortion case. You told the police you hardly knew her, but the victim said you were involved. Her face turned pale. That was years ago, Caleb. I didn't do anything wrong. Then why didn't you tell me? I demanded. Why keep hiding things if you've got nothing to be ashamed of? Because I knew you wouldn't believe me, she shouted, tears forming in her eyes. You've always looked at me like I'm some kind of screw-up. No matter what I do, I can't win with you. Her words hit harder than I wanted to admit. Then tell me the truth, I said, my voice softening. Just once. Tell me what's really going on. Avery sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Chloe's been blackmailing me, she admitted. She found out about the trust fund and started threatening to come after me for more money. I didn't know what to do, so I told her about the inheritance. I thought if she believed there was more, she'd leave me alone. And instead, she pulled me into her mess, I said, anger simmering beneath the surface. Avery nodded, tears streaming down her face. I never meant for this to happen, Caleb. I just wanted it to stop. Her confession left me with more questions than answers. Was she being honest, or was this another ploy to manipulate me? Either way, I knew one thing for certain. Chloe was the bigger threat. I decided to confront Chloe directly. After some digging, I tracked her down to a trendy bar downtown. She was easy to spot, holding court at a table surrounded by people who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Chloe, I said, approaching her. She looked up, her eyes narrowing. And you are? Caleb, I said, sitting down without waiting for an invitation. Avery's brother. Her lips curled into a sly smile. Ah, the protective sibling, how adorable. I know what you're doing, I said bluntly. It stops now. Stay away from my family, or you'll regret it. Chloe laughed, a sharp, cold sound. You've got guts, I'll give you that. But you're way out of your depth, sweetheart. This isn't your fight. It is now, I replied. I've got enough evidence to bury you. Police reports, witness statements, everything. If you don't back off, you'll be in a cell by the end of the week. For a moment, she looked unsettled, but then her smirk returned. Nice bluff, she said. But let's not pretend you're willing to go to war over Avery. She's not worth it, and we both know it. Her words stung, but I didn't let it show. Try me, I said, standing. This is your only warning. As I walked away, I could feel her gaze burning into my back. When I got home, Avery was waiting on the porch, her face streaked with fresh tears. Chloe called me, she said as I approached. What did you do? I told her to back off, I replied. You're safe now. Avery shook her head. You don't understand, Caleb. She's not going to stop. You've just made things worse. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Nice try, Caleb. You're playing a dangerous game. Better watch your back. A chill ran down my spine. Chloe wasn't bluffing, and now I'd made myself a target. The text hung in my mind like a storm cloud, dark, heavy, and impossible to ignore. Chloe's message wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration of war. I stared at the screen, torn between fear and anger, until Avery broke the silence. "What does it say?" she asked, her voice trembling. I handed her the phone, her eyes scanned the message, and I watched her expression crumble. "I told you," she whispered. "She's dangerous, Caleb." "I don't care," I snapped. "She's not going to keep terrorizing you or me." "But what if—" "No," I interrupted, my tone firm. "We're not running scared. Not this time." Avery didn't argue, but I could see the fear etched into her face. The next morning I called Marcus. "We need to act," I said, as soon as he answered. "What do you have in mind?" "Lock everything down," I said. "The cabin, the house, every piece of family property. If Chloe can't access anything, she loses her leverage. Marcus hesitated. That's smart, but it won't fix the bigger issue. If she's as dangerous as you say, she might escalate. I'll handle that, I replied, though I had no idea how. Just make sure everything's secure. Consider it done, Marcus said. Once Marcus completed the paperwork, I came up with a plan. It wasn't foolproof, but it was the best I could manage. I called Noah, knowing he'd back me up no matter how risky it sounded. She'd threaten you? Noah asked, his voice rising with anger. Yeah, I admitted, but I'm not just going to sit here and wait for her next move. What do you need me to do? I explained the plan, and to my relief, Noah didn't hesitate. Oh, let's do it, he said. The following evening, Noah and I parked outside the bar where I'd confronted Chloe. I'd sent her a message earlier, pretending to be Avery and offering to negotiate. The bait worked. Chloe arrived on time, looking as smug as ever. She's here, Noah muttered from the driver's seat. I nodded. Stay here, I'll handle this. Be careful, man, he said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. I stepped out of the car and made my way toward Chloe, who was leaning against the bar's outer wall, scrolling through her phone. Where's Avery? She asked, not even bothering to look up. She's not coming, I said, crossing my arms. Chloe finally lifted her gaze, her smirk fading. You again? Didn't you get the message? Oh, I got it loud and clear, I replied. But here's the thing. I'm not afraid of you. Chloe let out a cold, humorless laugh. You should be. Do you even realize who you're messing with? I know exactly who you are, I said, stepping closer. A fraud, a bully, and someone who's running out of options. Her face darkened and she narrowed her eyes. Careful, Caleb. You don't want to make me angry. Too late, I said sharply. I've already secured every piece of family property, the cabin, the house. None of it is within your reach anymore. You've lost all your leverage. It's over. Chloe's jaw clenched, and for a moment I thought she might lash out, but then she smiled. A slow, predatory grin that sent a chill down my spine. You think you've won? She said, her tone dripping with malice. That's adorable. She turned away and disappeared into the night. When I returned to the car, Noah was watching me closely, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. Well, he asked. It's not done, I said grimly. She knows we're on to her. What's the next step? I don't know, I admitted, but I'm not letting her win. The following days were tense. Every time my phone vibrated, I braced myself for another threat. Each time I stepped outside, I found myself scanning the street for any sign of Chloe or her associates. Avery moved in with Olivia and me, too frightened to stay alone. She spoke little, her guilt weighing her down. One evening, as we sat quietly in the living room, Avery finally broke the silence. I'm sorry, she said, her voice shaky. For what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. For everything, she said, tears streaming down her face. For dragging you into this, for being so foolish. I thought I could handle it, but I only made things worse. I wanted to stay angry with her, but seeing her like that made it impossible. We'll figure it out, I said, resting a hand on her shoulder. But you need to tell me everything. No more secrets. Avery nodded, wiping her eyes. The turning point came about a week later when Marcus called with unexpected news. I've got a contact in law enforcement, he said. I told him about Chloe and he ran her name through their database. Turns out she's already under investigation for another scam. What does that mean for us? I asked. It means we might have an opportunity to take her down, Marcus replied, but it'll require some cooperation. I didn't hesitate. Tell me what needs to be done. The plan was straightforward. Set up a sting operation to catch Chloe in the act. Avery would agree to meet with her and offer fake access to the lake cabin in exchange for Chloe leaving her alone. Meanwhile, law enforcement would monitor and record the entire exchange. It was risky, but it was our only chance to end this nightmare. The meeting took place at a secluded park. Avery sat on a bench, visibly anxious, with a hidden microphone tucked into her jacket. "She'll show," I said over the earpiece from the surveillance van, trying to reassure her. A few minutes later, Chloe arrived. "Well, you finally found some courage," she said, taking a seat beside Avery. "I just want this to be over," Avery replied, her voice trembling. "Good," Chloe said with a cold smile. "Then let's discuss the terms." As the conversation progressed, Chloe made it clear she had no plans to release Avery from her grip. She demanded full access to the cabin, insisting she would sell it to cover the debt. That was all the police needed. They moved in swiftly, arresting Chloe before she could react. Watching Chloe being escorted away in handcuffs was a surreal mix of relief and disbelief. It was finally over. Avery broke down, sobbing and apologizing repeatedly. "It's okay," I said, pulling her into a hug. "We'll get through this." And for the first time in years, I actually believed it.